When Flick and I first had the crazy idea of trying to save a crumbling 18th century French chateau, it never occurred to us that people around the world would be interested in sharing the journey with us. But I suppose fate has a way of intervening in these things, and when we arrived at Purnon at the start of 2020, it was the middle of the COVID lockdowns. The world's borders were closed, and so the world was shut off from us, and in a way we were shut off from the world. Each night, Flick would be writing these emails to friends and family who had planned to come and see what we were doing at Purnon, to try and tell them what had been happening.
And so I started to share a daily update on our socials and quite unimaginatively called it Today at the Chateau.
Thousands upon thousands of people watching all around the world. And we started to realise for the first time just how much interest there was in what we were doing here. Now, my mother is not very adroit with social media at all, and so she was missing in the adventure. So I decided to keep a diary for her, and we had this idea that perhaps in a few months' time we would take the words, print them out, bind them up and give them to her as a gift, so she wouldn't have missed out on our adventure here at Purnon. And in the midst of all of this, our story was featured on the cover of the Good Weekend magazine in Australia. And it was a story that really captured the zeitgeist. People were isolated, they were looking for something escapist, optimistic, perhaps a little adventurous, and the Purnon story really captured that. And that's really where the idea for the book came from. The words would be the words in the diary that I'd been writing for Mum, and the pictures would be these incredible images captured of the chateau in different seasons, in different states of restoration, with Flick and I and the other workers here on site doing the things that we were doing every day. And it would be this beautiful coffee table style book, but with the words telling the story of our journey so far. Chateau life is just full of these incredible highs and lows. On our first night here, we went to sleep in this 105-room chateau. We woke up the next morning, opened the windows, opened the shutters, looked out onto the incredible English park that sits behind us.
And there were 4 chevreuils or roe deer grazing in the park at the back of the chateau, and we were just gobsmacked. We
were used to the noise and the hustle and bustle of Paris, where you can always hear the traffic and the sirens. Whereas here at Purnon, there's just this beautiful, otherworldly silence. Gazing out at this park, Flick and I just looked at each other, and it was like, is this what our new life is really going to be like? But of course, in reality, it's like that, but it's nothing like that at all.
This project is more exhausting than we possibly could have imagined. There's days at the end of the day where you just completely collapse into bed and have nothing left. And then there's days where something happens that is just so extraordinary and you cannot believe how wonderful this journey is. It's such a huge roller coaster ride. It's so much more than we could have imagined on every level. The highs and lows are extreme.
It is full of these incredible highs and lows. We've been bitten by snakes, attacked by plagues of rats. We've broken bones, dealt with the chateau in freezing temperatures when the heating system's broken down. We've had to deal with electrical outages, every imaginable catastrophe that you can think of. Well, it happens here at the chateau, and when it happens on the big screen, because it's a vast estate, and when things go wrong, they really, really go wrong. In this room that I'm sitting in right now, when the storms come and the rain hits us, we get water inundation through the ceiling, and we're moving the buckets around to try desperately to protect the chateau.
Getting bitten by the snake was really a moment that was incredibly confronting. The pain was extraordinary. My entire hand was paralysed, and it took months to to recover.
But it's a wonderful adventure. You wouldn't miss it for the world. With each stage of the restoration, when you finish something and you start to prepare for the next thing, you look back at how much progress has been made. You look at the roof as the new slate tiles go down. You look at the facades as they clean them and return them to the original 18th century colour. You look at the stone pieces as they're sculpted and shaped and moulded in place, and you realise that really we're saving something here of rare and exquisite beauty, and there's a real sense of accomplishment and a sense of achievement at the end of every day, and it's just such a wonderful adventure. That's the story that we're telling in Château Reawakening, the incredible highs and the lows of trying to save this crumbling 18th century masterpiece of French architecture. I'd like to tell you that the first time Flick and I saw Château de Purnon, she was bathed in magnificent afternoon sunlight. But in reality, it wasn't like that at all.
The first time we saw Purnon was on this horrible grey winter's day. It was raining, there was no electricity inside the chateau, and so we walked around with this large torch, and it was something like either a horror movie or a magical adventure.
We just knew straight away that this was the place for us. Well, the biggest single decision that we've had to make on the path to restoring Purnon has been the choice of the heritage architect that we would work with.
And so we invited Frédéric Didier for a meeting at the chateau, and we could not believe his enthusiasm for the project. He'd been to Purnon previously, he was worried about its condition, he had held grave concerns about its future, and when he was here he started pulling back modern wallpapers and revealing original 18th century wallpapers. His passion was completely infectious, and Tim and I just looked at each other and straight away we said to him, will you do this project with us? And at that moment we knew we had found the perfect person to help us in this journey to bring Purnon back to life.
The first time we decided to open Purnon to the public was for the Château de Purnon, and this is a day in France where private homes that are heritage listed are encouraged to open so that local people can see something of their national heritage. And Purnon had been hidden for such a long time that we thought it would be wonderful to share her with our local community. Well, we could never have imagined the reaction that we got.
I received a phone call from a journalist from Le Monde, the largest national newspaper here in France, saying that they wanted to do an interview with me because they were going to feature Purnon as one of the top 10 sites to visit that Château de Purnon. And I was in shock. I couldn't believe it that this project had been catapulted into national attention. And then I was overtaken with absolute fear, like, what was going to happen for the Château de Purnon? How many people were going to turn up? Were we actually going to be able to manage it? And there was just a fear of the complete unknown.
As we prepared the property for the opening, we were cutting the lawns and cutting some trails so that people could safely walk around the property. And one of the workers from the local commune stopped his tractor on our front prairie and started taking photos. And I was a bit surprised that he felt the need to take photos because I assumed he must have seen Purnon many, many times before. And he had a tear in his eye, and he said he'd lived in the commune for decades, and one of his parents had actually worked here at the chateau, but he had never been inside the walls of the estate. And so for him it was quite an emotional thing to find himself actually preparing the property for its first public open day. On the day itself, cars started to arrive well before the opening time. It had caused a traffic jam in the village. The town had never seen anything like it. First, hundreds of people started coming in, and some were clutching old postcards and photos that they'd taken of Purnon and sharing their memories with us.
I remember standing on the front steps of the chateau, and a lady came up with her wedding photos in hand. Her parents had worked here at the chateau and they'd been given permission to use the front so that she could have her wedding photos. And she made this sort of, quick sort of comment to me, oh, the wedding didn't survive, but Purnon has. But it only just has, like she wasn't that far off being a complete ruin. There was another gentleman who had an entire book that he'd written and spiral bound, and it was his father's memoirs, and in his father's final years he'd been sitting with him noting his memoirs, and he'd put this memoir together and appeared at the Journée du Patrimoine to present it to me. And it's really emotional to hear these stories and to start to understand what Purnon means to people in this local community, and their gratitude for us coming to try and save her and bring her back to life. And we really started to realise that these stories and this community is what's going to pull us through and help us in bringing Purnon back to life.
Told us something about the importance of this place in the lives and the spirit of the local community, and we realised that our mission to save her wasn't just important to Flick and I, but it was important to people who'd lived in this area and whose family had lived here for many generations, and for whom the chateau was a really important part of their lives. And they'd been scared that with the state that she'd fallen into, perhaps she was in danger of being lost forever. Château Reawakening, it's a very personal story. It tells the story of the first 2.5 years of our adventure, our journey here saving Château de Purnon. It also tells the story of how warmly we've been welcomed by the local community here, and what an important role this place has played in the lives of this community over the last 2.5 centuries. But it's not just the story of our journey to save a building of exquisite beauty. It's also our journey, our adventure in uncovering the lives and the stories of the people who've lived and worked here over the last 2.5 centuries. Because it's through their stories and their lives that we reawaken this incredible chateau.